unconscious competence that I want to make. I love how this shows up in people. The most common reaction that I see is egoistic, what I call egoistic anger. It's the, why don't people just get it? What am I missing? Or I'm sorry, how is the world so dumb? Like, if they just knew X, then they could do Y. They probably are deeply unconsciously competent. And then the second reaction is the imposter syndrome. Oh, what am I missing? Because I see the world through this prism and nobody else around me is seeing that. So those are really helpful flags of attitudes that if you see somebody saying these over and over, then you know probably where they are sitting. Okay, so we went through 2 of the design patterns, and I just explained to you the third design pattern on leveling up, how to shift my team, how do I shift it forward. So when you choose that learning design pattern, and just to go back really quick, you're solving for people, meeting people where they are at. So if you're wanting that particular design pattern, you have to go through these steps, right? So step 1 is, what actually needs upskilled? So you can use one of the first 2 design patterns here immediately. What is the skill I need? I need my team to learn TDD. Okay, so plan that next day's tiny action and decide what it's going to be that is very, very achievable in that particular day or 2-day period, and then check out those results in the code. So that's the first step. What is that skill? You don't have to do that whole design pattern. You can just use that to decide what needs upskilled on your team in general. The second step is, now you need to figure out where is everybody on that competency level. So for that particular skill, and I say competency level, this often gets misconstrued as they're a good developer, they're a good product manager. That's not helpful. It's way too broad. How are they on doing writing unit tests as the comments and then converting to code? Could you just tell them to do that and they do it immediately with no problem? Probably highly competent then. If they go, what? Then you're probably going to have to spend more time with them. So who is at what competency for that particular skill that you have selected to upskill? So that is where you see the little developers here on the chart. You know, you have one person between 1 and 2. You've got a couple people, they're trying to apply the skill, but they're not quite sure where to go with it. One person working towards proficiency, another person just highly proficient. You're like, oh, should I just have them mentor the whole team? Because they really know what they're doing. That would be your temptation here. So just, you know, figure out where they are on the proficiency levels in order to know what next step to take. Once you know where everybody is, ask yourself, are you mobbing, are you mentoring, or are you managing? And the reason why I say ask yourself rather than do one of these new, I would not suggest adding something, adding a learning modality. I would call this a learning modality. Don't add a learning modality and learning information at the same time. If you are already mobbing, use the mob. If you are already doing a coach-mentor relationship, use that. Don't add a bunch of new when you're already asking them to learn new skills. So, and if you don't have any of these, please add one now, because that would be very helpful for your team to have a venue, a way, I should say a channel to learn. And all 3 of these are excellent channels to learn. Once you have that channel built and practicing, then you can start putting in those skills very easily. So the last step here, step 4, is you need to select the learning strategy. And you're just like, well, how do I know which strategy? These are very general, but it gives you an idea of where to go with it. So again, for familiarity, I had given the Scrum example of the model, or, you know, say if you look at the model, everybody has models. Everybody has models. It's the new favorite thing. Well, it's not new, actually. But you want the visual is really what happens. Our brain can take in a visual and parse that so much more easily than words. And then once you have that idea and you get the shapes in place and you get the patterns in place in your brain, which can do it very fast with imagery and mental models, then you can start practicing with frameworks, practicing with recipes. And that's where they're starting to get it like, oh, I can use this for here and here and here. Oh my God, why aren't we using this all the time? This is amazing. Once you get to conscious effort, you're getting bogged down, right? You're finding the problems. You're like, oh, well, it doesn't work for here or here or here. And so what you want to find is that one solution path that is a recipe that you have found that works for the team. That recipe may not work for team X or team Y, but it may work for your team. And you want to find that recipe and then continuing to parse that down, put it back together, figure out what works for your team. And then by the time you do that, your team will be very versed in being able to practice many solution paths, and they are now in a position to go, well, this is very useful for this context, but it's not so useful for that context. So they're in a really good place at that point. And then proficiency, they're mentoring at that. That's when they're mentoring. So I wanted to give an example of Deep Roots. This is the company that my partner and I run. We focus on keystone behaviors. When you look at this is huge, right? Most learning companies hone in on one area. So if you do end up buying something, I don't want to say don't buy because we sell, but at the same time, if you do, I also just don't want to suggest buy something off the shelf and everything will be great. It's not. You've got to be thinking along these terms of what works specifically for your team. So you find something specific for your team that somebody is selling. You're like, great, come in and do this. They're probably going to hone in on one section. That one section for Deep Roots is keystone behaviors, and we focus in on comprehension and conscious efforts. We have 2-day period designs, 2-day periods of using designs 1 and 2, over and over and over and over again. So when you are looking to hire somebody and go, what is it that you're teaching? You can look at this and go, oh, okay, you're going to really help us in conscious action. Great. You're aiming for people who are more skilled on this particular area, and I want to get them to a higher proficiency. Awesome. Then they're the right people to hire. But if they're struggling more, if it's brand new, you're probably going to aim more for a company that's doing something like this. So this can also be a model for how to hire learning if you need to. The Salmon Technical Coaching is another fantastic method of doing learning that is something that you hire for. And this is interesting because it does cover in that 2-week period that you're doing technical coaching with the mob. You actually run through every learning stage, or at least the top 5, which is more than what I know of any other learning model, to be honest. This is a 2-week period, and they unconsciously use design pattern 2. They don't know my particular design pattern, so they're not consciously applying it, but having seen it enough times, I know that they're using design pattern 2, and so they are just working through these stages. And what you'll notice here in the black section here is you have, in the familiarity, you have examples ready to show. In comprehension, you're demoing the recipe so that they can ask questions, make sure they're familiar with the idea and the concept. Then they're going to be applying that recipe to regular code as a mob continuously, and they're spending a lot of time in conscious effort. Just like at the beginning I was showing you, there's that big block that you're spending a lot of time in conscious effort. So they're going to apply that recipe many times. Conscious effort, this is where the coach comes in. The technical coach is going to be choosing where to let them fail or force a different solution. Okay, yeah, you've done this 6 times now. What's another way of doing that? So that's where the coach is coming in. And then if you're proficient, that coach is going to be really helping the driver's mentoring skills. They're going to not be at all telling anybody what to do, and they're going to try and get that driver to help with mentoring, to help with guiding. And they're not going to guide the mob at all. They're just guiding the driver. So that is how a coach, a Salmon technical coach, would approach it. But there are so many options. So whether you are mobbing or doing an ensemble, I put mobbing versus ensemble, it's whichever you call it, or you're doing mentoring, or you're doing one-to-one manager to employee, there is a way to be able to meet your employees where they're at, based on the learning stage they're at and the strategy you want to use. Just keep in mind that everybody will be in a different place. So mobbing is easy because they're all learning from each other. It is very natural to be coming in from different places. One-to-one mentoring, also very easy because you'll see over here in the one-to-one mentoring, they're demoing the recipe, and then again, one-to-one, you can answer those questions directly. You can review those results of the recipe applications. They can reflect together. They can have those discussions where the recipe isn't going to perfectly apply. So that's a little easier also. When you're doing a one-to-one manager to employee, that is fine, but just keep in mind that when you get towards that continuous practice, you're going to want to get them a mentor. You're not going to have the time as a manager to do that deep technical practice of looking at recipes, looking at practices, and making sure that they are learning what they need to be learning. So how do I choose a learning design? Just bringing it back to the forefront here, what is your goal? Which learning design pattern solves for that goal? Once you know what your goal is, and once you can see those learning design patterns, you can know which one fits your goal the best. So if you just have a very disparate team, maybe your goal is to beat them all where they're at, and so you want to look at that level shifting. Or maybe you want to get everybody on the same page with a particular behavior. Then you want learning design too. So that helps you keep on track. And then, are you keeping it simple? It is our human desire to complicate things. So just remember to keep it simple. If something feels complicated, I guarantee it's complicated, and you just want to take off a layer. One of my jobs as an instructional designer is to say, okay, now take out half. And then I watch them faint, and they get back up, and you're like, okay, good job. Now take off another half. And you have to keep doing that because our brains only can handle little tidbits at a time for real change. We can handle a lot of information up front, but then immediately forget it, and it's not in our system yet. It takes little chunks over time, and it can be a little amount of time. It can be a day. It could be 2 days. It could be a week. But it has to be tiny in order for it to begin that fast. And then, of course, tracking data is absolutely critical. As a researcher background, tracking data is lifeblood. So I don't have enough time here to go into all the ways to track it. But just remember, it's more common sense than you think, and make sure that you are looking at ways to see whether your methods are working. So where are we right now in this audience? You probably got all the way to familiarity. Hopefully. You see 3 learning design patterns. You see how they solve for problems that you may have identified on your team. You may even have been able to start to comprehend how to use that recipe that I gave you, which I gave you 1 recipe per learning design, right? So you may be thinking, oh, I could go home and I could do Y. Yeah, I can do that. So that's a good comprehension where you have something to go home with. And then I would say when you go home, when you try these things, you are entering conscious effort. So you may write some things down. You may have some ideas of how to take this into your workplace. And you may even have several tiny actions to start off with, which I would say is one of the simplest and best ways to start. And then when you get there and you see all the things that you forgot or didn't think of, that is where you're in conscious effort. You're like, oh, I did not think of that one. Okay. And you practice this enough times in enough different ways, and you tweak it to make it work for you and make it work for your team, you will start entering into that conscious action and proficiency. And then when you find out it's not that simple, when you are like, I just don't know where to go from here, feel free to email me. I'm on LinkedIn, and my email is here at the bottom, and I love to help people help their people. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Marian. We have time for Q&A. So please use Slido, the Q&A session, and also the poll session. So if you did like the presentation, let her know. Okay, until the questions arrive, we have one question. What learning strategy to choose if there are diverse skill levels in a team?
Okay, so if you have a lot of different skill levels on your team, I would, as best I could, get them working in the code base. If you're, I'm guessing everybody, is everybody working in a code base in your learning as you're in your teams? Okay, so if you are doing that, if you're in the code base, get in the code base and start practicing those tiny actions right away, and you'll immediately be able to see who's struggling and who just like gets it, and then pair them. And that will help them learn together really well. If you already have a mob, then this is very easy. It's going to come very naturally, and you don't even have to think about this question. But if you don't have that, then start pairing the ones who are least familiar with the most familiar.
Okay, we are still waiting for questions, but we had a short discussion beforehand, and it turned out that I'm leading a team of mostly developers, testers, and as a manager who is not really into the technical words, what would be the advice for me? I know this is not for the audience, but for me in general. So how can I, because with one-on-one with the manager, but if the manager is not really into development, then what would you say?
Okay.
What can I do?
This is something actually that I experience a lot myself because I work with a deeply technical partner and I am not technical in the slightest. So he says something I do not understand. I say, I don't understand. I don't get that. Can you explain that to me? What am I missing? And I just keep asking. I am the dumb person in the room. And it is so hard to be the dumb person because I'm like, no, I'm really smart. But
I have the same feeling actually sometimes.
It's like, no, be the dumb person. Do not be afraid of that. And just like, and then when you think you finally get it, you're like, oh, I get it. Be excited. I promise you, it will excite them. They will be like, I'm sorry, do you actually care what I do? Do you care what we're missing? And it will start creating that bridge. And so that's the most important bridge to be able to create. Once you start creating that bridge, you're going to be able to have these conversations more fluently the farther you go.
Yeah, but sometimes fake it until you make it doesn't work.
Exactly, yeah. And you will not care. Sometimes you'll just be like, I don't care. But you do care. You have to care. You have to care and just asking yourself, well, what's one thing we can do tomorrow?
Yeah, actually, this is what I usually do is to ask, okay, what can I do for you to be a better leader tomorrow than I am today? So this is something anybody in the audience can be okay with, I guess.
Getting it concrete fast is what you want.
Okay, one question arrived. How to make sure we don't force pairing or mobbing to the individuals that need it but are not aware of the need?
Okay. So sometimes a lot of I see incomprehension especially, they're the ones that think they need to be the mentor, which could be difficult, right? So in that situation, I would just ask them to lead. Say, okay, go help them. And that teaching, when you don't actually know as much as you think, is one of the most educational experiences. I will never be able to hear you say, you don't really get it. I'm like, yes, I do. And then when I have to explain it, I'm like, oh, wait, I totally do not get it. So let them fall on their face a little bit. Not in a mean way, but just say, okay, you want to help? Go mentor that person. Go pair with that person. And it may blow up, but that they will suddenly know what they need to learn.
Next question. As far as I know, if someone can explain or teach something, it means a deeper understanding. But in your model is only level 2. Why is that?
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time?
So, as far as I know, if someone can explain or teach something, it means a deeper understanding. But in your model, it is only level 2. Why is that?
Because explaining is only cognitive. With our brains, we can talk a lot and we can give a lot of examples, but when we are actually doing the coding, I would say that's beyond explaining. We are doing, we are in it, we are experimenting. So experimenting is a deeper level of learning than actually explaining. I hope that answers that question.
Okay, I think that's it from the
Okay.
question side. I would like to encourage everyone, if you are still here for a few hours, you can go freely, and we had a really great discussion, so it's worth to discuss with Marian. I have a little present. I've seen your husband's bag is there, so you know what is in.
Yes, paprika.
I wanted to say thanks a lot in the name of the organizing team, and another round of applause to Marian's great presentation, please.
Thank you.